Welcome, where business buying banter meets no BS reality. Get ready to dive into the world of buying and selling businesses without the fluff and fancy jargon. Whether you're a seasoned business buying pro or a curious aspiring entrepreneur, this is where the real talk happens. Because in business, there's no room for sugarcoating. Let's get down to the brass tacks.
Hoppa! Richard is in
Hoppa!
the house. What's
How
going
are you?
I'm good. I'm doing well. The sun is shining, and more businesses, baby boomer businesses, are trying to prepare to get on the market because the demand of buyers is growing exponentially, Richard.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I did a 2-hour webinar yesterday with a bunch of buyers who were, the average they were looking for about 6 months. So we talked about a lot of different things, specifically how to figure out the right business and deal flow and what have you. But we also talked about the amount of prospective buyers that are in the market now, even though the dynamic has changed a little bit because of recession, interest rates, etc. But because of this proliferation of entrepreneurship through acquisition and all these fancy terms that are too difficult for, there's all these $20 terms and you're trying to talk to a guy from a $2 neighborhood. So, but all these fancy terms, there's lots of buyers.
There's lots of buyers, and I think there's lots of buyers that are influenced about the 100% seller financing, which is an option. Now the new trend in the market is you can SBA finance a business with 1% down. That's another story, but can it be done? As you always says, anything can be done. It's just a matter of how do you mitigate it?
How do you mitigate it and the probabilities?
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
if the probability is really low, then you got to start breathing oxygen from this planet about how you can get a deal structure. Is it possible? Yes. But like someone asked me about businesses for zero down, buying a good businesses, and I've told them they were full of, but
right.
Is it possible? Yeah. If you look at 1,000, 10,000 or 100,000 possible businesses, yes. But by the time you find that one, you're going to be ready to retire.
Right on. Speaking of 1%, that brings me to our guest today, who we're going to bring on. And
good segue. Look at
I
you.
know I didn't write it. I'm just comes right out of the head and out the mouth, out the chute.
Out the chute.
But his business that he founded is called 1% Better Leader. And I think, Richard, if sellers and buyers all just did 1% better, where would we be?
Yeah, it doesn't take a whole lot of improvement to make a big difference.
Yeah.
And especially, as it relates to competition and all the businesses that I've owned and ran, I've always told, my wonderful employees, we just have to be better than everybody else. And it doesn't take that much work because most, especially in service related businesses, they let a lot fall through the crack. They're just not good. So if you could be a little bit better than everybody else, you really get noticed.
That is for sure. And we talk about that with our own personal coaches, advisors, and such. 1% better every day.
That's all.
That's it. But baby steps accumulate over time. And a lot of business owners need that time to turn it around to get their business prepared for the right buyer. But on the other hand, because the competition is so fierce today with searchers and buyers, you better be prepared and you better be working at getting 1% better every day. Coming to the table with 10 grand in your checking account and wanting to call brokers every day to see what kind of businesses they have for sale, you're wasting everybody's time.
Yeah. And it's, you have to separate yourself from the crowd, as it relates to buyers. There's so many people on the market that, knowledge, working effectively and efficiently, it makes the difference. And especially those who don't have a lot of their own capital to invest, well, they have to go about it in a slightly different way and impress the seller so that they establish a really good relationship, because then they'll open up some potential deal terms that others may not get offered because of the seller and the individual establish a really good relationship. So, but the key being is you have to differentiate yourself from the rest of the crowd. If not, it's just all like they show those videos of the caribous going off the cliff, like they're all following each other. If not, that's what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Differentiate yourself. I love that, Richard. You're so spot on. And it's applicable on the seller side as well. Differentiate yourself. It's hard for a Midwestern to say that word.
Isn't it hard for some people from Wisconsin to say like any words?
Well,
that's what I've been told. I don't know. I mean, I get made fun of all the time because, growing up in Canada, and I'm down here oftentimes, and today I'm so blocked with this cold, but oftentimes I'll be talking to someone and it's like 5 seconds into the conversation, they say to me, "What part of Canada are you from?"
Right. I get that too. I get a lot of people think I'm from Canada.
Yeah, when you go to Wisconsin, you get a lot of that sort of oot and boot sort of.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Are you familiar with what a bubbler is here in Wisconsin?
No, but I'm intrigued.
A bubbler. It's a water fountain, but we call them bubblers.
Bubblers?
Yeah. You ought to come to Wisconsin and drink from my bubbler.
Ooh, best offer I've had all day. Okay.
Oh my, having fun. All right. Well, it's time to get down to the nitty and the gritty with our guest, John Speisman. He is the founder of 1% Better Leader. And if you visit his LinkedIn profile, we'll bring him on here shortly. My favorite line in his profile, Richard, is work on your business instead of working in your business.
Amen to that.
And we're going to touch on that. So let's bring on John to the stage, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, how are you?
Great. Good to see you both.
Oh, good
Glad
to see
you're
you.
here.
Yeah.
Oh.
So
Deb, love that segue you made in to the 1%.
1%, yeah, pretty. She was very slick, right?
I
Yeah,
know,
that
I
was.
didn't
That
plan
was
that.
excellent.
I know, unplanned. Well, that's why you're a star here, Deb.
I don't like agendas. I just give me the mic and let's go. That's the way I roll. That's the way I roll. So John, tell us about that headline. What made you see the value in that headline for business owners?
Yeah, so the headline is really my tagline on LinkedIn is freeing executives to work on their business instead of in their business. And, because I had seen too many times where business owners started to, their business started to take them over, right? As they started to grow, they got busier and busier with routine tasks, the things that keep the business moving every day, or reactively solving problems, working in their business. And they just weren't getting time to work on the things that really were going to have an impact and allow them to achieve sustainable growth. So I thought about, what should they be doing if they're not working in their business? And I thought, well, maybe they should just be working on their business. So I think it's a good tagline because I get that question a lot. Like, what do you mean by that? So it leads to a great discussion about what kinds of things are working in your business versus on your business.
That's great. I have I've always told people like you want to be in business, not busyness. Yeah. And you've seen, and I guess it's similar to that. And you're talking about, putting out fires and how often talk to clients or individuals that they become firefighters, not business people. And it's a very hard road to go down. For me anyways, I found that oftentimes it's because the owners don't spend the money to put in the right people below them. They're doing everything themselves. And they get used to the money that's being thrown off from the business and they adjust their lifestyle accordingly. But that's my take, and you're the expert in the field. So what are a couple of high-level points that you find where people, they go off the reservation, they start making this mistake, and then they get themselves into becoming firefighters or working in it, not on it, or in busyness, as I like to say, like some of the things that you see them make mistakes, like repeatedly.
Yeah. No, you pointed out one of them. One could just be, right, this creating a constraint for themselves financially, right? That really boils down to short-term thinking, right? If you can't afford the help, then you're probably operating on too short of a time frame. You're not thinking about where you want to be down the road. Um, so that's one thing, one place that I struggle. The other thing I think just comes down to um, kind of mindsets about what it takes to operate as a team, right? So on a day-to-day basis, right, you're faced all the time with decisions about whether I should react to this urgent thing right here or whether I should let somebody else handle that and go work on something more important. Um, and a lot of times it's easy for owners to slide back and make the same decision every day to take care of that urgent thing,
Mhm.
right? And that's a little bit like the busyness that you mentioned, Richard. It feels good, right? It feels good to go ahead and check that box and take care of that urgent item. But that's not going to help drive value in your business over time,
Mm.
right? What's going to drive value in your business over time is building the capabilities of your team, right?
Right.
It's getting more out of the people that work for you, right? You
Yes.
mentioned earlier, sometimes people feel constrained that they think the answer is I need to hire more people.
Mhm.
I would say the answer is actually you need to figure out how to get more out of the people that you have. You Most businesses already have a lot of potential and unused capacity laying on the table.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
Don't they say, and I've heard this, the best way to figure out what kind of team you have is to take a vacation and let it go and see who steps up.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What happens? Can you take a vacation? Right? If you,
Can you?
you know, I think most business owners don't get into business because they want to be a slave to their business.
Mhm.
Right? They want to be successful and they want to improve their situation. Right? They want more freedom. They want more freedom in either in terms of resources and money, or they want more freedom in terms of time.
Right.
And unfortunately, sometimes once you create a business, the business can just start to take you over and start to consume you. And I love what you guys are doing, right? When things get real, when you come to a point where you might want to sell your business, that's when things really get real.
Yeah.
And you're confronted with what's the value of this enterprise that I've been building, and what happens if I'm out of the equation, right? A prospective buyer might look at a business where the owner is doing everything and say, this isn't worth anything to me because I don't want that job.
Right. At
Mhm.
any price. Yeah.
Yeah.
What we, one of the things that I teach my buyer clients, we have this course that walks them through one of the key questions, because there's a 36 key questions to ask a seller when you're going through the processes. To your point, is how much vacation do you take? And it's a multi-pronged question, because one is, if they don't take any vacation, it's an indication of a couple of things. Either they micromanage the business, or they haven't put the people in place.
Mhm.
That's a possibility as well. There's a number of possible answers, but they certainly have not trained themselves or their staff to be able to manage the business, or they don't trust their staff, which could be their problem or the staff's problem.
Right.
And the other question I always ask them is, what happens if you get hit by a Pepsi truck tomorrow?
Mhm.
Like, what happens to the business? Can it run and sustain itself? I have one client on the sell side that I worked for a while. He used to take 120 days vacation a year,
Wow.
Yeah.
and everything, and things ran well. So
Mhm.
if you don't, sometimes you don't have the luxury because of the money in the business, but other times you look at it and say, well, if you want to give yourself the luxury of having that, you got to take a step back for a while and have some
Yeah.
short-term pain,
Yeah.
so you could put these things into place and empower people to be able to make these decisions. Sometimes
That's right.
they just micromanage the hell out of it, and they can never. That's why it always stays a small business.
Well, and I mean, so have either of you ever worked for a micromanager?
Of
Yeah.
course.
I have.
Mhm. Yeah.
It sucks.
It
Oh,
does.
it was
Like nobody wants to work.
insanity.
So I don't know. You guys might not know this, but would it surprise you to know that less than 25% of people are actually engaged at work? Like they actually really care, and they're actually
Oh yeah, there's no surprise to me. I remember there was
yeah.
a survey that we referred to all the time, and I don't know if it was Gallup or
It's
whatever.
Gallup. Yeah.
And it was one of them was they talk about people that really they asked them to rate their jobs from I tolerate it to I love it to whatever. It was like 74% were either hate it, despise it, or
Wow.
significantly unhappy. It was
Yeah.
74%. So which fits perfectly with the 25, right?
Oh,
I mean,
Yeah, and I'll bet money that most of those people are working for a boss that's not empowering them,
yeah.
right? And so that's one of the things I really love to do with business owners is to work on, like, how do you create an environment, right? So working on your business is actually focusing on, how do I move that number up? How do
Mhm.
I get more and more people really engaged, empowered, right, to bring more of themselves into the business, right? And for me to start, it's not about dumping stuff. It's not about dumping stuff to your employees.
Mhm.
It's about engaging them to solve more and more of the problems. If you've got an organization where you have 50 people, but 50 people out there finding problems, but only one person solving them, the head cheese, the boss, you're in trouble, man.
yeah, yeah,
But if you got 50 people and you've got 50 problem solvers,
Yeah.
then you've got a really valuable business that's going to run well, and you're going to be able to take that vacation. You're going to be able to step away and be confident that the business is going to run.
I'd like,
It's not only going to drive value in your business.
yeah,
you know if you have a business like that, you might not want to sell it,
that's right.
because it's
right.
actually fun to run it.
I'd like to add for our listeners, if we have buyers in the audience, these days we see a lot of business listings on the market, John and Richard, absentee owned. It seems to be a big trend. Everything is absentee owned. And I tell my buyers, due diligence wise, to confirm, is it absentee owned? Richard, you were talking about building up a relationship with the seller. You're a buyer, you're building up the relationship. John, you're coaching people, to be absentee owned, you got to work on the business versus working in it. So I coach them in that relationship as the proposed buyer with the seller. Like you said, when's the last time you went on vacation? And if they tell you, I haven't been on one in the last 3 years, well, guess what? We're really not an absentee owned, are we?
I had a business owner once tell me with pride he hasn't been on a vacation for 14 years, and I said to him, like, and you're proud of that? Like,
Wow.
he said it with pride, like, and he was a guy from Eastern Europe, so I understand it was an old school mentality. He's quite a bit older than me at the time. Now there's much fewer people that are older than me, but he was, it was a number of years ago, and he said that with great pride. And
Mhm.
the world has changed quite a bit, and where there's probably going to be some conflict is you get the baby boomers, or just below that age, that are still going to be in business for another 5 to 15 years or what have you. And there's a real disconnect between their work ethic and the pay your dues mentality
Oh, yeah.
and this next generation that, thinks you get rich real quickly, or, the entitled mentality. There's a whole different discussion, but there's got to be some significant conflict.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Thanks for bringing that up. And I see that already, because a lot of the buyers today, they want it to be absentee owned. And I'm like, you better be doing your due diligence to make
Yeah.
sure it is, or you're going to have a rude awakening. So John, tell us your ideal client size for our audience to know if they are small business owners and they do want to match up with you to help advise them to work on their business versus working in it. What kind of business owners are you looking for? Approximately what size?
Okay, yeah. I find a kind of a sweet spot is on the small side. I would say folks starting at around 12 to 15 million in revenue.
Mm-hmm.
They need a certain scale to have big enough problems and opportunities to afford external help. And then all the way up to, I would say, about 200 million. A sweet spot for me is kind of privately held companies that have manufacturing operations. I have a pretty deep pedigree in manufacturing, and so it gives me another avenue to kind of add value in the relationship. Currently, I'm working with a diverse set. I work with both manufacturing and non-manufacturing, and also clients up to $1 billion. But I would say that 15 million to 200 million is a good sweet spot for me.
Hmm. You mentioned manufacturing. And what would you say are some of in like 30 seconds, what is the number one challenge today of manufacturing companies?
Wow, manufacturing companies, they're as diverse as there are products.
Yeah.
So that's a challenging one to answer. But usually it's um, right now. I think a lot of it lately has been around people. It's
Mhm.
around getting talent, keeping talent. That's been changing over the last few months. I would say it's getting better, but that's consistently a challenge, is finding good people and keeping good people. Um, Now, like I mentioned earlier, one big way that you can influence whether people stay or not, right, is through the engagement, right? What kind of environment do you have? Like, do people show up to work and they feel valued and they feel like part of a team and they're working toward a purpose that's meaningful? Those are the kinds of places that people love to get up and go to work, right?
Mhm.
If it's a place that you're going to go and you're just going to take orders and you're going to be, punching the clock, doing your time, then people are going to turn over more, and I see that consistently. You're going to get back from your employees what you put into your
Yeah.
employees.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, people is a consistent topic because manufacturing tends to, operations tend to be people heavy.
Yeah.
Right. It's pretty amazing that, I'm doing being in the universe of buying and selling businesses for 34 years, thinking some old um, books that I read, like Thriving on Chaos or Mark McCormick, but I don't teach you at Harvard Business, what they don't teach you at Harvard Business School, some real old classic books or whatever. And it's pretty amazing to me that going back from that time, I started working in 1981. God, I'm old. But the, the issue related to staff and employees, like it sounds to me, and you're right in the trenches, like we haven't learned much over all these years. Like we're talking about a generation or decades later, and it's still an issue with the way employees are or are not empowered, dealt with, treated, the opportunities that they are or are not given, the recognition of how important people are to the equation. It's like we haven't learned anything. It's
Mhm.
still a problem.
Right.
Well, I think it's something you can never stop learning about, Richard. It's an easy thing to say. It's a really hard thing to do, because what we're talking about is trust,
Right.
right? And I've seen a lot of people start to make improvements, and then something happens in the external environment. Maybe it's a recession, maybe it's kind of a something happens in their business sector, right? And management has to they start to get under tremendous pressure, and then they revert. They
Right.
start to act like they did before, right? They start to do things that undermine employee trust. And so I think we do learn. It's just that we unlearn
Yeah,
when
right,
we
or
when
we
we
learn
come under
slowly. Right.
pressure, right?
Yeah. Good
So
point.
it's a really hard, these cultures that I think do this well and that can maintain it over a long period of time. That's one of the reasons I prefer to work with privately held companies instead of publicly owned, or uh,
Yeah, publicly traded
because
company. Yeah.
when you're in the quarterly earnings environment,
Yeah. You
um,
make a lot of short-term stupid
you
decisions.
make short-term stupid decisions. When you own the company, when you are captain of your own destiny, then you have a chance, right, to be able to make different decisions. You have a
Yes.
chance to learn those lessons and to maintain that kind of culture over the long run.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point with the public companies. I worked for one at one point. I hated it. I mean, I had an executive position, and it seemed like my whole life was guided by the quarter. like just things that was like you couldn't really make a lot of long-term decisions. Granted, we weren't a billion-dollar company, but the stock was so vulnerable that it was like you lived quarter to quarter and filing to filing, which was unfortunately ridiculous. But yeah, I mean it makes sense. And what you do sounds, I mean, it's fascinating. And I like you. Certainly I like your approach. There's a lot of coaches out there, but it's from you look at it from a very interesting perspective of improvement gradually and being able to evaluate the company. So hopefully you'll be able to generate some interest with some of the listeners, because it from my standpoint, it behooves people to find as many intelligent, believable parties, I like to refer to them, or I stole that term from when I worked for the Dalio family office, because they were great calling believable parties. I used to call it the number one draft pick, but that's the concept, is find someone who's really knows their stuff and bring them in to help you. I do know, by the way, Deb, that we have a couple of questions. I want to let Patrick know.
Yes.
We're going to get to it in a second.
Yeah.
Got some great questions. And John, how do people get hold of you?
Yeah, I think the best way to get a hold of me is connect with me on LinkedIn, and you can DM me there, or there's a link on my profile if you want to chat. There's just a free, easy option. You can click a link on my profile and jump on my calendar for a chat.
Perfect. And we have the QR code up there right now, and make that available and make the information available in case anybody asks us post show. But this is great. We appreciate you joining us. This is terrific.
Yeah,
Awesome.
very helpful. Shall we have a question here we can put up on the board, Richard and John,
Yes.
and let's open it up for discussion. Thank you, Patrick. Your question.
Oh yeah, this is a perfect question.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yes, it's a good one.
Well, Utah friend. Good to see you, Patrick.
So, great question. How would you treat a business that's for sale where the owner is the business? And if they leave, so do the clients.
Okay, so I'll tell you that for me, this is like a slow hanging curveball right over the middle of the plate, because I deal with this all the time. So the first part, Patrick, is to really understand if they are the business, meaning there are cases where you simply cannot acquire the business because of this. It's not going to transition to a new owner. That happens frequently. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, but it happens frequently. So making that determination of, can this really transition to another individual altogether, is the first question that you have to answer. The drop down to that, or the double click to that, is if a new owner comes in and transitions to a new individual, how do you protect yourself in a deal to make sure it doesn't come back to bite you in the rear end, or the dupa, as Deb would say, mm-hmm. Meaning you're almost certainly going to have a performance-based agreement with the seller. If it's a case of that the entire business is really reliant on the owner, well, then by and large, the whole deal is going to be performance-based or an earn-out to make sure those clients continue. Now, if the owner is comfortable, and it's certainly something that I recommend my buyer clients do, is irrespective of what the deal terms are, you have to get in front of the customers, because before you close the deal, even if it's the last contingency, because you want to validate, is this even possible? Like, it doesn't matter if it's not possible. It doesn't matter how good the deal terms are. It's still going to cost you money if this business can't transition to you. So there's, those three different approaches to it. Is first understanding, again, are they really, really the business? Can it transition to you? And so have a performance-based agreement with them for the acquisition. And the third part, which comes before you purchase the business, is making sure, as part of your due diligence, you have to get in front of some of the customers, because it doesn't make sense. There's no deal good enough if the business won't sustain itself.
And I'd like to add on the bank lending side that the underwriters more than likely will pass on this deal, case by case, obviously. But if it is a business owner who has the relationships with the clients that are bringing in the revenue, we're not moving forward. We're going to have to call on John, a business advisor, to turn business around. So tell us how you would do that, John. This is your assignment now. What are you going to do?
Well, I mean, honestly, I would challenge this owner, and say, you don't have a business, you have a personal brand.
Right.
They've got to get to work on, transitioning whatever this secret sauce is that they have, whether it's relationships or knowledge or whatever it is. They've got to start to move that away from them and into something else, right? And whether that's other people, whether that's into solid contracts, right? Longer term contracts. You've got to do something to turn this
Right.
relationship into real assets, right? Otherwise, you don't have a business at all.
Yeah, there's no value there.
Yeah.
That's right.
Perfect.
Great question. And I love the panel of answers. Wonderful. Well, it's at the half hour mark before we wrap up the show. We can't end this episode without Who's the Dupa? It's coming. I know it's coming.
It's coming.
There we go. All the time. We love it. Here is our story. We're going to make it short. A gentleman proposed. I've been on a roll, building a successful business over the past 3 years. My fiance, who left her job, gets paid by the company for minimal help at the business. I pay her for keeping our home clean. I now have bought a new business to expand and grow my empire. And she is now making me choose between our relationship, we're engaged, and the expansion. She worries about the time and risks involved, and I see it as a step forward to further our future income. Who's the dupa? Because she wants me to make a decision to sell the business or to stay with her and sell the business, or keep the business and lose her.
Oh, good question. Do you want me to take a stab at this?
I want to hear both of you.
So I look at this. I think there's a couple of ways of looking at this. I certainly get the point of where she says, doesn't want the additional acquisition because it's going to infringe upon their time, family time, or whatever. I mean, it's mostly speculation at this point as to how much that's infringing. So I think at that, from a human relationship standpoint, probably has a very valid comment. So that's on the relationship side.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side of things, on the reality side of things, and I don't think this is a male female thing. On the reality side of things, if this individual owns the business and has entrepreneurial blood running through his veins, then this subject or issue is going to surface again. It's only a matter of time. Like if you're an entrepreneur and you want to build something, well, he may take a step back now and say, okay, you know what, I hear what you're saying. I won't buy this business, all good. But in 2 or 3 years from now, it's going to happen again because you can't, like when you're an entrepreneur, you can't help yourself. And then the third part, looking at it just from a guy's perspective, is, if you haven't even got married yet, and she's making demands. Okay,
so great.
Boom. So I think she's the dupa.
All right. Now, before we get to John, I'm going to give my side of the story. This is just me. If that's my fiance and all I have to do is cook and clean the house, go for it. Buy that freaking business and expand it.
It's a good deal, right?
Bring it home, baby. Bring home the bacon. I'll take care of you on the home front.
Perfect.
That's what I have to say. So,
okay, John,
she's
pressure's
the
on.
dupa is what I say. So what do you have to say,
yeah.
John?
Yeah, I mean, when I was listening to this, I was thinking that this is like a smoke signal. There's a different problem here. I think there's a relationship problem behind this. That, like Richard said, if you don't get to the bottom of this, right, it's going to come up or it's going to get bigger somewhere else, right? So I heard kind of a cry for attention, that we need communication here and kind of partnership. So I think probably he needs to look a little bit in the mirror. But on the other hand, on the surface, so there's a danger signal here that he needs to be listening to. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, on the surface, right, I'm with Deb. Like, hey, it sounds like a pretty good deal if that's what she needs to do.
I'm in. I'll do it tomorrow.
I'm in. Like, hey, I'll put on my apron and do the cooking and cleaning.
You'll look good.
But I suspect there's probably more to the story behind it. So yeah. I think actually he's probably the dupa.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I remember days being a commercial loan portfolio. One particular customer of mine went through a bad divorce because he grew the business so huge and took on other companies and was working 80 hours a week. And he was devastated. And the numbers he was in my portfolio started to go down because the marriage was failing. I'm sure
Yeah.
you see that, both of you.
Oh,
right?
all the time. Yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
yeah.
Happy,
Oh.
happy wife, happy life.
Yeah.
Happy home life, happy life, and you do get a lot of business owners. It crosses the gender. Doesn't matter male, female, who running a business. They spend way too time with it, and they get their gratification. That's how they get their buzz, and it just impacts life at home. And
Yeah.
and you
That's
miss a
why
lot.
they need to be working on the business instead of in the business.
There you
Amen to that.
go. That's
So
a great,
that's the dupa. Good take by the three.
that's a great way to end the show, I would say. I think we're all good. We want to thank everyone for joining us. Business Buying Banter. John, it was a pleasure to have you as a guest.
Thank
Richard,
you.
always making me smile and laugh every day. We'll be back next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern, Business Buying Banter. We thank you. And until next time, we're out of here.
All right.
Ciao,
Goodbye.
Deb. See you later. Thanks again, John.
Thank you. Take care.